So, about last night, we had talked about the Canadiens and the Winnipeg Jets game, and how yesterday we saw Jake Allen do everything in his power after 2 goals scored by the Jets in very quick succession to keep the Montreal Canadiens in it and allow them to win in a shootout. Jake Allen was flawless. After the 2 goals that were scored in the second, he didn't allow a single shot by him in the rest of the second period, the third period, the overtime period, or the shootout. He was great, but I wanted to have a conversation about Canadiens goaltending once more, because there are still some interesting things floating around in regards to this trio. Now, the guy we're talking about today, you know from the title, you know from the thumbnail, today we are talking about Cayden Primeau and his season so far. We're going over the rumors as to where he could go next and which teams are apparently still interested in his services. Primeau has 1 game played, and admittedly it looks really bad when you acknowledge that he had a 4.15 goals against and an 8.79 save percentage in this loss against New Jersey, but this was the Tyler Toffoli game, so we'll give him the pass. Honestly, Cayden Primeau in the first period of this game looked really good and was one of the only reasons the Canadiens actually had a chance. But in that second and in that third, that's when things really started to fall apart, and that's where Toffoli started to do his thing. So Cayden Primeau, statistically speaking, has not been great this year, but I will say this game was a lot better than the stats would indicate. However, there is this article on TVA Sports that I wanted to go out there and read. It was from almost a week ago, October 24th, talking about how there are NHL teams that are still interested in Cayden Primeau. Some teams are hoping that he ends up on waivers in order to claim him, according to Renaud Lavoie. Now, this article was initially French. I translated it to English via the Google machine. The article will be linked in the description if you want to read more on this yourself. In his La Mise en Chèque segment on the JIC show on Tuesday, the insider revealed that the Canadiens ran a certain danger if their goaltender's name was ever placed on waivers. Okay, we can translate that a little bit better. Essentially what he's saying is that the Habs run the risk of losing Primeau to waivers because several teams look at this situation and they say to themselves, if Primeau goes on waivers, that will be our time to go and get him. Lavoie mentioned 3 teams in passing: the Ducks, the Blues, and the Devils. These 3 teams count on promising young goaltenders who currently play the auxiliary role. These teams are asking themselves, would it be better to send this young guy to play 2 or 3 games per week in the AHL, or just 1 here in the NHL? Now, honestly, the way he's phrasing it, or at least the way it's translated in the article, isn't the most coherent type of thought process, but essentially, these teams, if you wanted to label them out, the Ducks, the Blues, and the Devils, are interested in Cayden Primeau, at least according to what Renaud Lavoie is saying. What I wanted to do was go over to each of these 3 teams and their goaltending situations and talk about how Primeau could add or subtract from what they already have. Firstly, though, the idea and the thought process at the end of the article, something I think we need to address as well. I think I speak for most Canadiens fans when I say that the best case for Cayden Primeau, if you want this guy to become the best version of himself, it's probably to finally becoming a backup in the NHL. Like, that is probably the most desirable outcome for him, for this season at least, if you're focused on purely just making him the best goaltender he could be. Now, I'm not going to go out there and say that putting Primeau in as a backup every 3 or 4 games or so, 2 or 3 games and every back-to-back, I'm not saying that's going to win you hockey games. Like, that could very well go out there and lose you some if Cayden Primeau is not able to be a full-time NHL backup at this moment in time. But his sample size has been so limited at the top level that you kind of have to just eventually go, okay, fine. It's been so long, you've been in the AHL long enough, you've been getting better throughout the AHL playoff runs, but your AHL numbers have not really gotten too much hotter. But whatever, if we're not too focused on winning games right away and we're in that rebuilding phase, why not use this time to develop you in the NHL, right? And if these teams are the ones that want to do that, then okay, that's totally fine. However, if you go over to each of these teams and their goaltending situations, you'll find a little bit of a different scenario with each one of them. Starting out with the Anaheim Ducks here, they've got 2 goalies in their rotation right now, Lukas Dostal, who he himself is a young guy, and John Gibson, who has been the subject of trade rumors for so long now. Dostal's at a .929 save percentage and a .234 goals against in 3 games. John Gibson's at a .905 and a .281, so Dostal has actually been the better goalie, and he's 23 years old himself, so definitely a young guy too. I think ideally, if the John Gibson thing is actually able to work, let's say they finally find a trade partner for him, send him off to a team that could use his services and keep him around, maybe acquiring a guy like Primeau would be the next step in trying to find your solidified number one. Now, Lukas Dostal has been so good as a prospect. I remember talking about him years ago, back before he was even an NHL or AHL guy. When he was playing in Finland, he was dominant over there. But if you wanted to say, hey, give him some young competition, make it so that they're rotating around, seeing who's better, trying to outwork themselves, maybe that competitive environment is good enough to bolster up both of their careers. Maybe make it so that in a few seasons you have Cayden Primeau and Lukas Dostal each challenging each other and becoming better. That, of course, is an ideal situation, but it's not guaranteed to work. Sometimes one guy is just significantly better than the other times one guy just really doesn't work out. Let's go over onto the St. Louis Blues and talk about them and their goaltending situation right now. Now, this year, it's been really good for Jordan Binnington. The guy's at a .926 save percentage and a .233 goals against. Lost to Vancouver the other night, but still, he's been great. Joel Hofer is there in their backup position with 2 games played, a .913 save percentage and a .301 goals against average. Now, Hofer is a really interesting name because, as we had talked about with Dostal, this guy's 2000 born. He's younger than I am, actually. 23 years old, Hofer is, and he has been a more than okay AHL goaltender for the Springfield Thunderbirds. Now, the interesting thing is, I don't think the St. Louis Blues are too keen on the idea of moving away from Binnington. Sure, he had his antics the past few years. Sure, he had his down season last year. But he's bounced back and he's looked better than ever, so it seems more so like the St. Louis Blues, if they wanted to get Primeau, would be just more so interested in getting that 3-goalie rotation going on again. And you have to ask yourself once more, hey, is that really the right way to develop this guy? Maybe your perspective is not really focused on developing, maybe you don't really care about how good Primeau gets. If you just get a backup, I guess you could say, that is okay, then that's what you want. Okay, that's fine. But I think it's just more beneficial to think about this idea with Primeau's future in mind as well, because of course we don't want him to stay an NHL, AHL tweener his entire career. When he was dominating the NCAA, we all thought he could become a starter down the line. He played a calm, smooth game in net, and his initials were CP, so obviously we were like, yeah, Carey Price, Cayden Primeau, it works, right? But either way, let's go over on to the third and final team that is apparently interested in Primeau if he were to be placed on waivers. That is the New Jersey Devils, and this is probably the most interesting one out of them all because the Devils are a wagon this year, and they have a bad goaltending duo. They've been winning games for sure, but Vitek Vanacek has an .891 on the season, .330 goals against as well. Akira Schmid, .863 save percentage and a .407 goals against. These numbers are pretty bad, and even though they have gotten a lot of dubs, the question is definitely there. Hey, what exactly is the goaltending going to look like heading into the postseason and beyond? Let's face it, the Devils are going to be good enough to make the playoffs. They'll be in the dance. But is this goaltending duo really the one that takes you to a Stanley Cup? Now, I'm not going to say that Cayden Primeau is going to do that instead, but you could argue that more of that sort of internal competition that is brought upon by having a third guy in the rotation who is also vying for a spot and who has a legitimate chance at working his way into the rotation and succeeding, you could debate that third guy will really push Schmidt and Vanacek to becoming better. Maybe it actually works out. Now, for either of these two guys as well, if you wanted to talk about projectability and long-term stability, Vanacek is 27 years old, Akira Schmid is 23, so of course you're probably putting more of your baskets, or what in the world did I just say there? More eggs into the Akira Schmid basket if you're projecting a long-term projectable frame. Vanacek being 27, he's not the oldest guy in the world, but he's definitely not as young. So who knows if bringing in another guy like Primeau, who is 24 himself, would be beneficial to this goaltending identity that the Devils have struggled with. How it's really not been great. Definitely one of the worst goaltending duos for a better team in the league, pretty much. You just got to start wondering, when is that goaltending going to become a problem? So if Cayden Primeau is inevitably the guy that any of these three teams would be interested in acquiring, I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How does this make you feel? Do you think the Habs should try to dangle Primeau out there for a trade? Try to get something out of these teams? Do you even want to see Primeau gone? Would you prefer Montembeault or Allen to be moved instead? If you're a fan of any of these three teams, then what are your thoughts on the idea of Primeau coming over to your squad and adding yet another goalie in the rotation? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.